Freeze. That one word, sharp and commanding, sliced through the cold night air like a bullet. My heart stopped. My hands shot up without thinking. The blinding beam of a flashlight pinned me against the wall as if I were some dangerous criminal. But I wasn't. I was just a man, broken, exhausted, and invisible to the world, trying to find a place to rest. The alley where I had curled up was damp, littered with scraps of paper, and reeked of garbage. It was the only corner near the courthouse where I thought no one would bother me. I hadn't eaten properly in 2 days. My legs ached from walking aimlessly, my shoes so worn they barely held together. My body screamed for rest, but rest was a luxury I could no longer afford. The officer holding the flashlight squinted at me, his hand resting cautiously on his holster. "Sir, you can't sleep here," he said firmly, stepping closer. The light stabbed at my eyes, forcing me to turn my head. I raised my voice just enough to be heard over the buzzing of a nearby street lamp. "I'm not causing trouble, officer. I just needed a place to rest. I have nowhere else to go." The second officer, younger and with a softer voice, exchanged a glance with his partner. "You've been here long?" he asked. I shook my head. "No, just a few hours. I'll move if you want me to." My voice cracked. I hated how weak I sounded. I used to command respect once, but now I was just a shadow people stepped over. The first officer sighed. "Look, this is government property. We can't let people stay here overnight. Do you have any ID?" I hesitated. My hands trembled as I dug through the deep pockets of my ragged jacket. Inside were a few coins, a half-empty bottle of water, and an old folded letter that had been with me for years. I hadn't even realized it was still there. As I fumbled, the letter slipped from my fingers and fluttered to the ground. The officer bent down, picked it up, and unfolded it. His eyes scanned the paper before reading the name aloud, slowly, as if testing the weight of it. David Carter. The moment my name echoed in the night, something changed. His expression softened. His grip on the flashlight loosened, and the harsh beam lowered slightly. "David Carter," he repeated, almost to himself, like the name rang a bell somewhere deep in his memory. I nodded warily. "That's me." For a moment, there was silence except for the hum of the streetlight and the distant barking of a stray dog. The officer's jaw tightened. He folded the letter carefully, almost respectfully, and handed it back to me. Then, to my surprise, he said quietly, "Wait here." His partner raised an eyebrow. "What are you doing?" "Just wait here," he repeated firmly, his tone leaving no room for argument. The younger officer looked confused, but didn't press further. They stepped aside, speaking in hushed voices. I couldn't make out what they were saying, but I could see the older one pull out a radio and make a call. My heart pounded harder with every second that passed. What were they planning? Was I about to be arrested? Or thrown into some shelter against my will? The cold wind cut through my thin jacket, making me shiver as I stood there, uncertain of my fate. My mind wandered back to better days, when I wore a uniform, when I had brothers in arms beside me, when I had purpose. Back then, my name meant something. But now, I was just another nameless face in the crowd. Or so I thought. Minutes felt like hours. Finally, the officer returned. "Mr. Carter," he said with a strange mixture of respect and urgency, "there's someone inside who needs to see you." I frowned. "See me? Why? I haven't done anything wrong." He didn't answer directly. "Just come with us." His voice had lost the edge of suspicion it had earlier. Instead, it carried something else, curiosity, maybe even. "Oh," the younger officer muttered, "this is unusual," but followed orders, leading me across the empty courtyard toward the massive courthouse doors. The building loomed over me, its stone pillars casting long shadows in the moonlight. I hadn't been inside a courthouse in years, not since my discharge hearings. The doors creaked open, and a rush of warm air hit my face. I stumbled slightly, overwhelmed by the sudden change in temperature. Inside, the halls were quiet except for the echo of our footsteps. The officers guided me past security checkpoints, down corridors lined with portraits of stern-looking judges and plaques commemorating cases I'd never heard of. Every step felt unreal. Why was I being treated differently? Why wasn't I being thrown out like usual? Finally, we stopped in front of a large wooden door. The older officer knocked lightly, then pushed it open. "Sir, we found him," he said to someone inside. My eyes adjusted to the dimly lit room. Behind a massive desk sat a man in a suit, papers scattered in front of him. He looked up, and the moment his eyes met mine, his expression froze. For a heartbeat, no one said a word. Then, with a voice trembling with disbelief, the man behind the desk spoke. David Carter. Hearing my name on his lips sent a chill down my spine. I didn't know who he was, or why he looked at me as if he'd just seen a ghost. But deep down, I sensed that this night, this strange, unpredictable night, was about to flip my entire world upside down. The heavy wooden doors swung shut behind me, echoing like a drumbeat in the nearly empty courtroom. The sound of my worn-out boots against the polished floor fell out of place, each step scraping through the silence. The officers who had escorted me stood off to the side, whispering to one another, as if even they didn't fully understand why they'd brought me here. I kept my eyes low, ashamed of how I looked. My coat was torn, the lining sticking out like frayed bandages. My beard was scruffy, my hair matted under an old cap. Every eye in the room, clerks, security, even a few late-night lawyers, was on me. Their whispers slithered through the air, and I could almost hear their thoughts. Who is he? Why is a homeless man here? Is he in trouble? The courtroom smelled of polished wood and faint traces of coffee. The air carried a strange tension, like everyone sensed something unusual was about to happen. I was led to stand in front of the judge's bench. My knees trembled, not out of fear, but because I hadn't eaten properly in days. Then, the double doors at the far end opened. A tall man with silver hair strode in. His black robe swayed slightly as he climbed the steps to his bench. His face was stern, the kind that could silence an entire room with a single glance. But there was something in his eyes, sharp, calculating, as though he could see through every lie ever told in that courtroom. The clerk called out, "All rise." Everyone stood. My heart pounded louder than the creak of the wooden seats. The judge sat, and with a firm but controlled voice, he said, "You may be seated." He looked directly at me, not with contempt, as I had grown used to over the years, but with curiosity, like I was a puzzle he was trying to solve. "What brings you here, Mr. Carter?" His voice was deep, commanding, but there was no harshness in it. I swallowed hard. I just needed a place to rest, I admitted. My voice cracked with exhaustion and something else, embarrassment. I hated admitting my weakness in front of strangers. The judge tilted his head, studying me carefully. "Rest? Is that all?" "Yes, sir." I took a shaky breath. The officers found me outside. I wasn't causing trouble. I just didn't know where else to go. For a moment, the judge said nothing. He leaned forward, elbows resting on the bench, and asked in a softer tone, "What's your full name?" No one had asked me that in years. Most people didn't care. They just called me "Hey," or "You," or "Get out of here." Saying my full name felt almost foreign. My lips trembled as I finally spoke. "David Carter. Sergeant David Carter, U.S. Marines." The words hung in the air like an explosion. The room went so silent you could hear the ticking of the clock on the wall. The murmurs stopped abruptly, as if someone had pressed mute. The judge's eyes widened. His gavel, which had been resting in his hand, trembled slightly. The sternness on his face cracked, revealing something raw. Shock, maybe even fear. He whispered, almost to himself, "No, it can't be." His voice was barely audible, but in the silence of the courtroom, it was loud enough for everyone to hear. The clerks exchanged glances, puzzled. One leaned to the other and muttered, "What's going on?" The officers at the back shifted uncomfortably. Everyone was confused, and so was I. I frowned. "Sir, do I know you?" The judge didn't answer right away. He gripped the edge of the bench as if steadying himself. His eyes locked on me, and I saw something flicker there, recognition. "You said Sergeant David Carter," he said slowly, like confirming it with himself. "Yes, sir," I replied, my voice firmer this time. "2nd Battalion, U.S. Marines. Served in Fallujah, Ramadi, and a few other places I'd rather forget." Gasps rippled through the small crowd. The courtroom buzzed again, whispers filling the air. Some were just curious, others sounded almost reverent. The judge stood from his chair, something judges rarely do. His breathing was heavy. "I need to know." He took a few steps down from the bench, his robe trailing behind him. "Were you in Fallujah, 2004? The mention of that year made my stomach twist. Memories I had buried deep clawed their way back to the surface. The firefight, the screaming, the smell of smoke and blood. My voice was low when I said, "Yes, sir. I was there." The judge's face drained of color. His hands trembled. For a moment, I thought he might collapse. The room was dead silent now, all eyes locked on him as he staggered closer to me. He stopped just a few feet away, staring as if he were looking at a ghost. You saved my life." The words hit me like a punch to the chest. I blinked, trying to process what he had just said. "What? You don't remember me," he said, tears welling in his eyes. "But I remember you. That night, during the ambush. You dragged me out. You carried me through gunfire when everyone else thought I was done for. You saved me." The room erupted in gasps again. Even the officers at the back froze, their mouths slightly open. I tried to search my memory. Faces blurred together during those years, but something in his eyes, desperate, grateful, sparked a memory of a young soldier bleeding out under heavy fire. I had grabbed him, shielded him, and carried him to safety. I never knew what became of him. And now, here he was, a judge, a man of power, standing in front of me, trembling like a leaf. The courtroom was so quiet that when he finally spoke again, everyone heard it clearly. "I thought you were dead. I never knew your name. But now I know." I stood frozen, my heart pounding. Why was this judge, this powerful man, so shaken by my name? What about my name had shaken him to the core? And more importantly, how was this moment about to change everything? The judge's hands gripped the edge of the bench so tightly his knuckles turned white. His voice cracked as he said my name again, almost as if saying it would make the memories real. "Sergeant David Carter." He swallowed hard. "Were you stationed in Fallujah, 2004? My chest tightened at the mention of that place, a name that still haunted my dreams. I clenched my fists to stop them from shaking. "Yes, sir," I replied. My voice came out low, rough with emotion. "2nd Battalion." The room was silent. Everyone was frozen, hanging on every word. The judge stepped down slowly from his bench, each step echoing through the courtroom like a drumbeat. His face had lost all its color. He no longer looked like the powerful figure who ruled over this room. He looked like a man confronting a ghost from his past. Tears brimmed in his eyes. His voice trembled when he spoke again. "You saved my life." I blinked. "What? You don't remember me," he said, taking another step toward me. "But I remember you. That night, in Fallujah." My breath hitched. Memories I had buried deep clawed their way back, vivid and violent. It was a moonless night in Fallujah, the air thick with smoke and dust. We were ambushed on the outskirts of the city. Bullets ripped through the darkness, explosions lighting up the sky. I remembered the screams of my brothers, the chaos, the smell of gunpowder mixed with blood. Through the chaos, I had heard a voice, a young soldier's voice, calling for help. He was pinned down, bleeding, surrounded by enemy fire. Every instinct told me to stay behind cover, to save myself. But that wasn't who I was. I charged forward, bullets whizzing past me, dragging him out while returning fire. He was slipping in and out of consciousness, but I kept going, ignoring the pain from my own wounds. I carried him to safety, handed him to the medics, and went back into the fight. Back then, I never asked for names. We just saved who we could and moved on. That's what Marines do. Now, standing in this courtroom years later, that memory hit me like a tidal wave. I looked at the judge, really looked at him, and suddenly, I saw him. The young soldier from that night, older now, but the eyes were the same. "That soldier," the judge whispered, his voice trembling, "was me." The entire courtroom gasped. Even the officers at the back looked stunned. The clerks froze, mouths open in shock. My knees went weak. My hands shook. After all these years, the man I had saved had been right here in front of me. Someone who had gone on to build a life, to rise to power, while I had fallen through the cracks. The judge's lips quivered as he stepped closer. "I spent years wondering about the man who saved me. I never knew your name. I thought you might have died. But now," he choked back a sob. "Now you're here." He stopped just a few feet away. And then, to the astonishment of everyone in the courtroom, this powerful man, the one who commanded respect from all, slowly sank to his knees before me. The whispers rose like a wave, a mixture of shock and awe. The officers exchanged glances, unsure what to do. Some of the clerks even wiped tears from their eyes. The judge looked up at me, his voice breaking. "I owe you my life." I stared at him, stunned, my throat tight. You don't have to. I will not let you suffer another day on the streets," he interrupted, his words filled with determination. Not after what you did for me. Not after what you've sacrificed. The entire courtroom was dead silent, as if time itself had stopped. All I could hear was the pounding of my own heart. For years, I had wandered the streets invisible to the world, forgotten by the very country I served. And now, in a single moment, my name, had brought a man to his knees. The judge stood slowly, wiping his eyes. From this day forward, Sergeant Carter, things will change. I will make sure of it. I didn't know what to say. My voice cracked when I finally spoke. Sir, I was just doing my duty. He placed a hand on my shoulder, gripping it firmly. And now it's my duty to repay you. At that moment, the past roared back, not to haunt me, but to remind me that what we do, every act of bravery, every sacrifice, leaves an echo that can change lives, even years later. Little did I know, this was only the beginning of how my life was about to be rebuilt. The gavel came down with a soft thud as the judge called for an immediate recess. The buzz of whispers filled the courtroom once again, but I barely noticed. My head was spinning. One moment, I had been a nameless figure sleeping on the cold streets, and now, a man of power was looking at me as though I had saved his entire world. The judge gestured to me with a gentle nod. Come with me. I followed him down a narrow hallway that led to his private chambers. The polished wooden door shut behind us, and for the first time since entering the courthouse, the world outside fell away. The room smelled faintly of old books and leather. It was warm, quiet, and filled with shelves lined with case files and framed certificates. On his desk sat a single photo of a younger man in military uniform. It was him, the same soldier I had pulled out of the fire all those years ago. He stood by the window, his hands trembling slightly as he clasped them together. When he finally turned to face me, his expression was no longer that of a judge, but of a man carrying a debt he could never forget. How long have you been homeless? He asked softly, almost afraid of the answer. I shifted uncomfortably in my seat. 8 years, I admitted. My voice was barely above a whisper. After my discharge, things got rough. I came back to nothing. My wife left. I lost my job. The nightmares didn't stop. Before I knew it, I was out on the streets. The judge's jaw tightened. His hands balled into fists, knuckles white. 8 years, he repeated, as though the words themselves were an injustice. You sacrificed for this country, for me, and this is how life repaid you. I shrugged. Life's tough. Not everyone makes it back in one piece, even if they're breathing. For a moment, he said nothing. Then he walked over, pulled out his phone, and with a voice full of command, started making calls right in front of me. Get me the head of the Veterans Assistance Program. Yes, now. I have someone who needs immediate help. Another call followed. Find me the best transitional housing in the city. I don't care if it's full. Make room. Then another. I want a medical evaluation for a former Marine. Yes, today. Pull strings if you have to. He wasn't just talking to one or two people. He called veterans organizations, housing services, even what sounded like personal friends in high places. Every word he spoke carried authority. He wasn't asking for help. He was demanding it. I sat there stunned. No one had ever gone to bat for me like this, not in years. By the end of the day, everything had changed. The officers who had once seen me as just another homeless man now escorted me with respect. They drove me to a clean, safe veterans housing facility where a room had already been prepared. A warm bed waited for me, with crisp sheets that smelled of detergent. There were clean clothes neatly folded on the chair and a hot meal laid out on the table. When I sat on that bed, I almost cried. It felt strange, soft, welcoming. I had forgotten what comfort felt like. That night, I slept without fear, without cold creeping into my bones, without having to keep one eye open for danger. But the judge's help didn't stop there. The next morning, he personally showed up to check on me. I was still half asleep when I heard a knock on the door, and when I opened it, there he was, without the robe, dressed in a simple suit, holding a cup of coffee. How are you feeling, Sergeant? He asked. I didn't know what to say. Better than I have in years. He smiled, but there was still sadness in his eyes. Good, because this is only the beginning. He had arranged for me to meet with doctors for both physical and mental health care. They talked to me, listened to me, and for once, I felt like someone actually cared. He also signed me up for a job program designed specifically for veterans. They taught me how to update my resume, helped me with training, and even lined up interviews. Every step of the way, The judge checked in personally, like a brother making sure I stayed on my feet. Days turned into weeks. My appearance changed. I shaved, got a haircut, started wearing proper clothes again. But more importantly, something inside me changed. The hopelessness that had clung to me for so long was fading. For the first time in years, I felt something I thought I'd lost forever. Hope. Hope that maybe life wasn't done with me yet. Hope that the sacrifices I made hadn't been for nothing. Hope that I could rebuild, piece by piece. And all because one man remembered the night our lives crossed paths and refused to let me fall through the cracks. Weeks passed, and with each sunrise, my life looked less like the nightmare it had been for years. I had a roof over my head, a warm bed to sleep in, and the steady rhythm of a life with purpose returning to me. My beard was gone, my clothes no longer tattered, and my back stood straighter, not just because of the clean suit I now wore, but because of the pride that had been reignited inside me. That morning, as I adjusted the tie around my neck in the mirror, I barely recognized the man staring back at me. Gone was the ghost who wandered the streets, invisible to the world. In his place stood Sergeant David Carter, not just a veteran, not just a survivor, but a man who had found his dignity again. When I stepped into the courthouse that day, it felt surreal. The same halls where I had walked in as a broken man now echoed with the sound of my polished shoes. People didn't look at me with pity anymore. They looked at me with respect. The courtroom was packed. Word had spread quickly about my story. Reporters filled the back rows, their cameras ready. Veterans sat among the audience, some saluting me as I walked past. Even strangers had come, curious about the man whose name had shaken a judge to his core. Then, the judge entered. The room rose in silence, and he nodded to the crowd before speaking. Today, he began, his voice steady yet filled with emotion. We honor someone who has given more than most will ever understand. This man saved my life years ago on a battlefield where hope was scarce and courage was everything. I stand here today because of him. He turned to me, his eyes glistening. Sergeant David Carter, it is my privilege to introduce you to this courtroom, not as a case, not as a defendant, but as a hero. The words struck me deep. The room erupted in applause, and for a moment, I was overwhelmed. I wasn't used to attention, especially not the kind that lifted me up instead of tearing me down. Reporters scribbled notes and snapped photos as the judge continued. There are debts in life that can never be repaid. But there are also actions that can echo through time, changing lives in ways we could never imagine. Sergeant Carter reminded me of that truth. He stepped aside, gesturing for me to speak. My hands trembled slightly as I walked up to the podium. I looked out at the faces watching me, faces of veterans, strangers, and even children sitting quietly with their parents. I'm not used to speeches. I began, my voice cracking. But I'll say this, when I was on the streets, I thought my name didn't matter anymore. I thought my past was meaningless, forgotten. But then, my name reminded someone of a debt of honor. And that changed everything. The crowd listened in complete silence. I didn't save that soldier back then because I wanted recognition. I saved him because it was the right thing to do. And in return, years later, he saved me. Life has a way of coming full circle. I paused, my throat tightening. To anyone who feels invisible, forgotten, or broken, you matter. Your actions matter. And one day, your name may mean more than you ever thought possible. The applause that followed was deafening. Some people stood, clapping and cheering. Others wiped away tears. After the ceremony, reporters approached me with offers for interviews. Veteran organizations reached out, offering support and opportunities. Job offers poured in from people who had heard my story. But beyond the headlines and offers, what mattered most to me was the feeling of dignity returning to my life. Later, as the crowd dispersed, I stood beside the judge. He looked at me with the same gratitude he had shown that first night. You gave me a second chance at life, he said quietly. Helping you was the least I could do. I smiled. You didn't just help me, Judge. You gave me back my honor. He extended his hand, but instead of shaking it, I saluted him. A salute filled with respect, gratitude, and a bond that only two men who had saved each other's lives could understand. As I walked out of the courthouse, the sun was setting, casting a golden glow across the city. For the first time in years, I felt truly alive. I'm David Carter, a Marine, a survivor, and I'll never forget the day my name made a judge fall to his knees. because that was the day my life began again.